And joining me tonight on the news are Bijen Panda, Jay Panda as he is popularly known from the BJP. Also with us Shantanu Gupta, author, written a book on Yogi himself. Also joining us this evening is the man with the numbers, Yashwant Deshmukh, political analyst, runs such successful polls during elections with Sea Voter. Sanjay Jha, suspended Congress leader, as I love to call him. And of course, joining us tonight is author who has written several books, Hindol Sen Gupta. I first want to begin with Jay Panda. Jay Panda, number one, it's a big achievement for the BJP to have a second term in Uttar Pradesh after 37 years. Yogi, just the man to do it, has proved his governance plus his saffron combination so well. But do you think this is once again the beginning of jostling for place of prominence at the national level that will be the BJP's challenge at this point?
Navika, it is without a doubt that Yogi Ji is emerging as one of the tallest leaders of the BJP. And he has been mentored in this role by Prime Minister Modi Ji himself, as we have seen over these past few years. He has been given solid backing by Home Minister Amit Shah, who was, as you pointed out, the party president who turned around UP and turned around our campaign nationally to get us these solid numbers that we have had for the past more than 7 years. Now, in terms of your question, no, I don't think there is any jostling. The BJP is not only the world's largest party, it is the most democratic party. This is a party that allows people to rise no matter whichever background they come from. Modi ji himself came from very humble background. Amit Shah ji, JP Nadda ji, and Yogi ji himself, they've all come from very humble backgrounds and have risen to the highest levels in the party or in the government in their respective spheres. Now, this is what distinguishes the BJP from other parties, because the other parties are all based on nepotism, where a person with talent cannot rise unless she or he is related to those at the top. So what is natural for us seems a little unusual for other people when talent is being groomed. And this is not just at the highest levels as you are seeing and talking about now. This happens at the panchayat level, this happens at the district level and the state level, and there are innumerable examples throughout the country. Now, this seems odd to many people in India because we have got used to 60 years of nepotism. We have got used to jostling, because usually in these other parties, it's just one family or one person who controls the party. And so there is indeed jostling. Now here it's not jostling, it's a natural process of talent being recognized and being backed in a collective fashion. So this is a very positive thing. And it's clear that BJP has a lot of talent. It allows talent to rise, and that augurs well for the party and for the country going forward.
Well, yeah, while the dynastic politics has been demolished by the BJP, no argument about that. But do you think, Sanjay Jha, this is going to be a simple coming to a second term in Uttar Pradesh, or do you think, Yogi will have some more governance to prove himself before he can make it to Gen Next of the BJP? How do you see Yogi 2.0 and brand Yogi going from 22 to 24 first and beyond that for the BJP?
Navika, I do believe that the BJP at the moment is having a problem of plenty, which is a great circumstance to be in. I mean, they got leaders who are regional satraps, very powerful, doing well electorally. And they have managed to get good people. I mean, Jay Panda is an excellent example, along with my friend Jyotiraditya, Jitin Prasad, and so on and so forth. I mean, they have managed to assimilate good talent. So the old criticism with which a lot of people, including, people like me in the Congress, who used to say that the BJP has a talent deficit, to that extent, they have neutralized it. And I think full credit to a party which is winning. And that's the way the trends normally happen. I also want to make one distinction though. What the BJP does with Mr. Adityanath is entirely their internal challenge. It will not be easy because I'm sure there are people like Mr. Amit Shah who are equally ambitious and who have played a critical role in the resurrection of the BJP. But that's an internal problem. I do feel, however, Navika, that much as there is going to be a lot of triumphalism and celebration, which is natural in the BJP with Mr. Adityanath's extraordinary win, and there's no denying that. But one has to also recognize that electoral results do not necessarily manifest exceptional governance, or they do not really write off some extremely what I call as questionable antecedents of the past. So when I look at Mr. Adityanath, my first introduction to him was through those horrific hate speeches that were made, his arrest, his crying in parliament. And there was a lot of stuff that was uttered by people who were on the stage with him, which I think shamed me as an Indian citizen to see any political personality being associated with such divisive and very, very inflammatory language. I think even my friend Jay Panda will probably agree with that, even if he does so reluctantly. The second point, which is very critical, you asked a very good question on governance. Mr. Adityanath has won the second round, but I want to point out two factors here. The NITI Aayog has emphasized not once but several times that Uttar Pradesh remains the worst in the entire country on parameters of health. Number two, it still remains an extremely poor country. In defense, the BJP says, well, it has improved in the last 5 years. But let me tell you, if you're actually operating from a very low base, your improvement should be actually more dramatic and more remarkable, which clearly hasn't happened. The second very questionable point here on Mr. Adityanath, there is an independent body which has evaluated all the states on governance. And guess what, Navika? On governance of the big states, Uttar Pradesh is at its lowest on growth, equity and sustainability. It's an independent report. It's done by a public affairs center based out of Bangalore. And whether it's malnutrition, real wages, dowry deaths, attacks on SC/ST, attacks on women, criminal developments, sustainability in terms of pollution, etc., they have ranked Uttar Pradesh at an abysmal low. So the BJP has challenges. I will concede that electorally they are a formidable machine. Mr. Modi still has a certain charisma. It's working like magic. There is a political brand with all personalities.
You almost make it sound, Sanjay Jha, as if, these problems were not known to the people. The people have voted for Yogi Adityanath without Yogi Adityanath being able to deliver on anything. It seems to me like you're clutching at straws to be able to find a chink in the armor right now, because many people said बड़ा मुश्किल है योगी आदित्यनाथ का जीतना. And Shantanu Gupta, I want to ask you, ये नीति आयोग की report, when it was being talked of during the elections, in the run-up to the elections, one could at least understand why they're doing it. But for somebody to raise that today, for Akhilesh Yadav to say today that, the swearing-in ceremony is going on at a stadium that's been built by the Samajwadi Party. Do you think it's a case of, bad losers?
I think it may that be. I'm saying I'm sitting currently in that stadium and doing live with your team since 1 o'clock. We are here, and outside there was an amazing oath ceremony today.
Did you say Jai Akhilesh before sitting there because stadium उन्होंने बनाया है?
You see, the lot of oaths happen in different rooms, multiple structures. I think Akhilesh might have built one. As per him, the Purvanchal Expressway was made by him. Maybe tomorrow he will say the Ram Mandir is made by him. I think that's beside the point, and people made it a laughing stock after a point. I think my point was that today what happened, and I witnessed it live and doing a lot of live shows with your team, was not normally a oath. It was a victory, as a cultural victory of Uttar Pradesh, of Bharat. It was a victory of Imandari, a victory for good governance. People have seen, and I have traveled far and wide in Uttar Pradesh while writing my second book. And whichever village I went to, Navika, women folks have shown me, Lala देखिए मोदी जी ने 2000 रुपए भेजे हैं, ये विधवा पेंशन का पैसा आया है, ये राशन मिला है, आप घर चलिए आपको मोदी Modi ji ke chulhe pe, that's a very common term these days, Modi ji ke chulhe pe chai pilayenge, right? You see, we have a toilet now, we have a house now. I think just sitting somewhere, Sanjay Ji is making some random remarks, and NITI Aayog data shows Uttar Pradesh in absolute term is not good, but in Delta, Uttar Pradesh is number 1. You have to see what Uttar Pradesh was and Uttar Pradesh is today. You can't compare all of a sudden Uttar Pradesh maybe with a Gujarat or a Maharashtra or a Tamil Nadu who have better indices all this while. You have to see what Delta has been achieved in last 1 year. And that's why someone like WHO, someone like UNICEF, someone like Mumbai High Court, even a member of parliament from Australia wanted to loan Yogi Adityanath to manage Corona in their country. So I think now when Yogi Adityanath has emerged on the stage and such a huge show today, I think he's more assertive, he's politically more powerful, he's more experienced. He in fact expressed yesterday very humbly that I was not experienced, and Narendra Modi and Amit Shah guided me, handheld me and coached me. I think he agreed that himself. So I think he's a super learner, and what he achieved in this election is unprecedented. His political weight in BJP and the country is certainly increased, and I think now he's first among equals, I guess.
Navika, quick rebuttal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Sanjay.
Can Shantanu deny what happened in Hathras or in Unnao, or the comments of the Supreme Court on Lakhimpur Kheri? You know, those are strong strictures, my friend. And that's governance, by the way. You want to know, you want me to repeat to you what the Supreme Court...
The suspended Congress leader, please pick up the statistics of Rajasthan. You know, I hate to say this. I'm not saying that Hathras and Unnao are acceptable things. Certainly not. I'm not even saying Lakhimpur Kheri is something that should have happened in a civilized country. But at the same time, let's also look at some of the other places. We love to speak, and the Congress, whether suspended or otherwise, loves to speak about Uttar Pradesh, but never about Rajasthan. So today let's leave it at that. But let me get in Yashwant Deshmukh. He's a numbers man, and he's studied the numbers very closely. Yashwant, do you think this was a caste combination social engineering victory? Do you think that is the way forward for the BJP, or do you think we are heavily into personality politics? And in this case, the personality, the combo of Modi Yogi just worked wonders for them. How do you see this victory of Yogi Adityanath in Uttar Pradesh?
Well, Navika, you know, it's a combination of many things. I mean, first of all, I completely looking at the data, I attribute this victory of the BJP to the last mile delivery of all the schemes and welfare schemes, the ration that was given in the last 2 years, the toilets that were made, which was directly responsible actually to drop in the crime against women in Uttar Pradesh. They did not come through bulldozer, they did come via the construction of the toilets. It's a very important thing. And women voting for the BJP cutting across the caste line, that was the biggest, I can say, the change in electoral equations that I have seen in the last 25 odd years. Having said that, coming back to your original question, this is the day Adityanath has certainly, he can say that he has arrived at the national stage. While I will not really say that he is first among the equals, but yes, he has come into the scene. And he has come into the scene with a bang, no doubt about that. However, I would still consider that he has a long way to go even to be counted as the first among the equals, for a simple reason that even Prime Minister Modi had to win 3 terms on his own as a lone standalone candidate to prove that he is a winning machine. As we all know, 2017 was a mandate for Prime Minister Modi, and Shantanu just mentioned his own personal experience currently, that this election was also big term damage control and a resounding victory, both in terms of Prime Minister Modi as the first engine and maybe Yogi Adityanath as the second engine into the play. What credit that Mr. Yogi Adityanath has to be given, that he was not a liability for the BJP, unlike other chief ministers, including the Uttarakhand and the Goa one. I don't mind saying this on record as well. Yogi Adityanath was and happens and remains to be an asset for the BJP. However, just like any other individual, he also has few handicaps which he has to overcome before he says that I am the first among the equals in a post-Modi scenario. First of all, he has to win the mandate on his own. Not courtesy Mr. Modi. Number two, he has to deliver the governance of the state government on record, not the not the central government schemes or not the Modi schemes. Number three, his biggest asset is his image of being anti-mafia on law and order. He has to cultivate that very carefully. However, as you mentioned in your first few lines of this program, that Prime Minister Modi is now seen as a much bigger personality taking everybody along, because his big bang arrival on the national politics was post 2002 Godhra riots. But what we saw between 2002 and 2012 was Mr. Modi crafting his image way beyond Godhra, way beyond polarized politics, and taking it to the Gujarat model of governance. I think even the law and order agenda or law and order issue driven by the bulldozer Baba image had a lot of communal undertone to it. I think if Mr. Yogi wants to arrive as first among the equals, he has to charter the exact line, length and the path that Prime Minister Modi has taken himself, by taking everybody along, by picking up a world-class team, really team of smart people who can be his backbone, his second in command, third in command, and even taking everybody along who are not on his side of the table. Remember, even Sushma Swaraj ji was the prime contender against Mr. Modi, but Mr. Modi carried Mrs. Sushma Swaraj as one of the most trusted partners in government. And so did he carry Mr. Rajnath Singh, and is still carrying Mr. Nitin Gadkari along with him. So I think he has a great potential. But to say that he has arrived as the first among the equals, he still has to charter a long way, Navika, because we all know becoming a prime ministerial candidate or becoming a prime minister game is not that easy as we compare to Uttar Pradesh. Yes, Uttar Pradesh is critical. Yes, Uttar Pradesh is very important since 80-odd Lok Sabha seats. But at the same time, we know that 2017 and 2022 mandate primarily have been delivered on the basis of popularity of Prime Minister Modi, and the double engine where the popularity of Mr. Yogi has become supplementary and complementary to the popularity of the Prime Minister. That is what actually is the success mantra in the UP has been. But anybody who is a well-wisher, Navika, of Mr. Yogi, anybody who is a well-wisher of Mr. Yogi would tell him very clearly he has still a long way to go if he wants to say that he is the first among the equals or he has arrived as the next Prime Minister.
Well, then Yashwant
all
Deshmukh,
the well-wishers of him
then Yashwant Deshmukh, you take the honors of being very fond of Mr. Yogi, because you've stated the positives and you've stated the road that he still needs to travel. Let me get Mr. Hindol Sengupta. Yes, Yogi has become a very tall figure, but Yashwant Deshmukh, points out to the facts that many of the schemes, which were the Modi government schemes, Modi schemes that have actually helped Yogi Adityanath in Uttar Pradesh. Do you think the fact is that even 8% Muslims have voted for the BJP this time around in Uttar Pradesh? Do you think that is the Modi charisma? And therefore, what Yashwant Deshmukh says, big bang, second term, but miles to travel for Yogi Adityanath.
Navika, I would like to focus, Navika, really on the development story that is building in Uttar Pradesh. Now, as far as Yashwant Deshmukh's comments on Prime Minister Modi's schemes reflecting on Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, well, there are many chief ministers in India from the BJP who have won in so-called Modi waves. So that point, while valid, is rather, that point can be stretched to other states too. But there's something unique happening in Uttar Pradesh, and we should focus our attention to try and understanding what's happening there. Uttar Pradesh was always one of the laggard states. If you look at it economically, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar are two states which were really pulling India down in many ways. But Uttar Pradesh is effecting a turnaround. Somebody mentioned the women vote. The women vote is a particularly interesting phenomena that's developing. But where does that women vote come from? I recently did numbers with a colleague of mine across 9 charts. And if you look at all these parameters that we analyzed, whether it's menstrual health, whether it's cooking stoves away from wood fuel, whether it's toilets, whether it's availability of water, there's a whole range of things, including, by the way, financial inclusion during COVID using digital platforms, which of course we are discussing far more intensively now, even in the context of, digital sovereignty, against the backdrop of the Ukraine war. But all of this direct application of governance at the very grassroots is having a transformative effect. It is very tragic in India that we still consistently talk about, this subcaste or that subcaste, this religion or that religion as far as voting is concerned. But Indian voters in India's biggest state, remember, if Uttar Pradesh was an independent country, it would be the 4th or 5th largest democracy in the world. That's the size of Uttar Pradesh. Their voters are essentially telling us that they are going past these divisions. They are actually voting on the basis of a transformation, a developmental transformation that's happening on the ground, on actual lives being led. I want to mention one scheme that many people on this panel might know. There's something called ODOP, One District, One Product, which essentially talks about, and Uttar Pradesh is really a pioneering state in applying this scheme. It essentially champions for domestic consumption and for exports, in a sense, unique products from India's districts, right? Now, when you do that successfully across many districts, the money goes to the grassroots. Now, this money going to the grassroots has transformative impact. We have seen it again and again in developmental economics. Two things changes places: money in the hands of women, which men cannot access easily, and the education of girls, hygiene of girls. When you connect these dots together, transformation has happened in country after country. And indeed, Uttar Pradesh is large enough to be a country. In Europe, it would be an entirely separate country. But Uttar Pradesh is, in a sense, transforming itself, I would argue, if this is the path that continues, through its infrastructural change. You talk about the expressway, the highways. I mean, recently, I went to Vrindavan, and from my home in East Delhi, it took 2 hours. I was astonished that I reached Vrindavan door to door in 2 hours. It's absolutely amazing, the world-class highways and expressways that the state has. This kind of transformation in a state that has always been considered a laggard is truly something remarkable. And if Uttar Pradesh truly continues down this path, then nothing can stop India from achieving double-digit growth for a long period of time, Navika. And the people at the grassroots, much more than people like you and me, who are the relative elites of this country, people at the grassroots understand this. And I feel very strongly they see real impact in their hand, in their wallet, in their pocket, and that's how their electoral behavior changes.
That's very well put, Hindol Sengupta. Sanjay Jha, of course, has a smile. But Sanjay Jha, there's a point in what Mr. Sengupta says. The fact is that there will be Modi schemes, but the last mile matters. I mean, Rajiv Gandhi very famously said, we give 1 rupee, only 15 paisa reaches. Now, if it is reaching and changing people's behavior towards those who govern them, they're re-electing people, there is transformative change that has happened at the grassroots level. You can't take it away from Yogi Adityanath because he's done it in Uttar Pradesh. And while you look at the dark clouds, many people are looking at the ray of hope, as Shantanu Gupta also put out about the fact that see the change that's happened. It's a laggard. It will take time to come up. And this was said in an off-record meeting, which I today can make public, by Yogi Adityanath when we met him in Varanasi. He said Uttar Pradesh with 26 crore people has a budget of 2 lakh crores. We should have a budget of 20 lakh crores. Now, that's the vision that the man has. despite the saffron robes that he wears. So, Sanjay Jha, are you underestimating the power of brand Yogi?
Navika, actually, I'm not. I'm actually arguing in a very bipartisan way, looking at hard data, because you have got enough people on your show today who believe that Uttar Pradesh is the next El Dorado. And I think they're misleading themselves and the viewers of your show. And I'll tell you why. I'm not denying that over 5 years, even an incompetent government run by probably somebody who doesn't even understand the A to Z of governance would create some degree of growth, if not completely. I'm not saying that you have to be another league to destabilize a state or a country. So there has to be some growth, and I'm not taking that away. But look at the one data that will tell you as to why there is a lot of euphoria that is totally, in my opinion, ridiculously exaggerated. One manifestation of growth in any economy or society on which there is no debate universally, Navika, is jobs. Okay? And look at the jobs in Uttar Pradesh. Mr. Sen Gupta waxed eloquent on women's empowerment, etc. I think if you look at the data on attacks on women, I think it's disconcerting for Uttar Pradesh. But look at the female participation rate in the labor force, not just of India, but of Uttar Pradesh. It's actually gone down. In a society that is actually looking at women's emancipation, women actually come forward and work a lot more. Now, yes, it's true that a cylinder here and an XYZ here adds up to making people feel there is a difference. But if you look at the entire allocation on which so-called welfare model works, the truth is it's a very small allocation out of the total budget of the government. It's got to do with the RSS people knocking on doors and saying, "Aapne Modi ji ka namak khaya hai," which I believe is a statement I believe is not just political hubris, it is also highly immoral to make that statement. The second, which
morality.
we also, and I remember
morality coming from the Congress party.
Young students were protesting on railway reservation jobs. They were attacking trains. I mean, these are symptoms of a deeper economic malaise within the system. It is not, I'm not saying that things may not have changed, but Uttar Pradesh is a long, long way to go. And the government is still doing communal polarization.
Jai Panda, respond to Sanjay Jha. I think he's wearing sunglasses at night, so he's seeing everything in a dark shade of black.
Even though my friend Sanjay Jha is no longer with the Congress party, I think he's still carrying a lot of that baggage. Let me clarify some of these issues. When you talk about the development of a building, you don't talk about building the 5th floor first. You first talk about building the ground floor. And so even in Europe, if you compare countries, and they're all developed countries in Europe, you look at Southern European countries and their governance and their development indices are far lower than Nordic countries. And Italy, for example, compared to Denmark, has not come across well. And Uttar Pradesh had been so badly mismanaged before the BJP took charge 5 years ago that it was the Wild West. So the ground floor of turning Uttar Pradesh around has been law and order. And the law and order turnaround in Uttar Pradesh is dramatic and highly effective. Everybody has reported on that, including your channel and everybody else. You look at the women's vote, you look at women's opinions on it. This is the ground floor. Law and order has to be turned around before you can have economic development, before you can have women's participation in the labor force, all these things that Sanjay Jha was talking about. The development thereafter doesn't happen on a linear basis. It happens in a very hockey stick curve. Once you get the ground ready, then development happens much faster. And all the other indices that some of the other panelists have talked about are testimony to that. Second, the accusation that Yogi Adityanath is communal. This is a very typical left liberal accusation against anybody that comes out from the BJP. The same accusations have been made about Vajpayee ji, Advani ji, Modi ji, and they have all in the end prevailed. They've prevailed in the courts of law. They've prevailed in the courts of public opinion. And if it were true, what Sanjay Jha said, then it couldn't also be true, which you pointed out, that the BJP in Uttar Pradesh has got 8% of the Muslim vote. Now, that is a very noticeable number, higher than what we used to get traditionally. So it's not just women's vote, it is also minority votes. And when we say, when he talks about this discrimination, the reality is our principle of sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas is true, because you cannot point out a single instance where any government plan, any government scheme in Uttar Pradesh, whether it is central government or whether it is state government, has any discrimination based on caste or religion or gender or any such thing. So the fact is that there has been a noticeable uptick, not just in vote shares of those who traditionally didn't vote for us. This is an election that has broken many barriers of silos of caste, and many other regressive type of politics have been overcome by the aspirational politics that the BJP represents under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, in which Yogi Ji is a rising star. And ultimately, I would say that the proof of the pudding lies in the eating. All these arguments against what has happened in Uttar Pradesh just does not make sense in light of how the people of Uttar Pradesh have reacted to the leadership of Prime Minister Modi and Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath.
That's exactly the point. And therefore, let's move from that question, because UP has been won and clearly people have voted more for the BJP than for the opposition. And that, to my mind, ends the debate on nobody can say everything is perfect. Even in the United States of America, the most developed country, everything is not okay. There are problems in every place. So this is work in progress. But at the moment, what people do is trust the BJP to get them there rather than trust anybody in the opposition. So on that, Yashwant Deshmukh, I want to ask you, from 2022 to 2024, how does the road look to you? What will be the role of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath, and the road ahead for the BJP in 24?
Well, Navika, I would like to simply, on the statistical term, that, whenever there are Vidhan Sabha elections, everybody looks into the Lok Sabha vote share and says BJP's vote share will drop by 10 points when compared to Lok Sabha elections. That is one argument which is correct, and that's the one which I always highlighted that. But the argument which is goes along with this argument, that BJP gets a Modi dividend in Lok Sabha election of almost 10%. So whatever Vidhan Sabha vote that BJP is getting right now, you can simply add about 8 to 10% over that whenever the Lok Sabha election happens, if the situation remains the same what we are watching today. So that will give you an idea what the scenario is likely to be. Having said that, the problem or the situation of the opposition, that has its own story to tell, Navika, because all said and done, there is an affirmative pro-incumbent vote for many governments across India. That includes the governments which are being run by opposition as well. Many opposition leaders are getting mandates on their own as far as the state assembly elections are concerned. But as far as the Lok Sabha is considered, I think if there is no drastic change in the scenario, which is unlikely at this point of time, I think the things are going to be really easier for Mr. Modi and the BJP to win 2024. However, if the opposition tries to do something different, drastically different, what they have been doing so far, which will include two things, primary conditions. Number one, that the opposition, rest of the non-Congress opposition, has to realize that there cannot be a joint opposition without the Congress, and the Congress has to realize there cannot be serious competition to Mr. Modi and to the BJP with Gandhis as the leader of the opposition. So these two things have to be realized by the opposition, then only any serious challenge can mount. Until that point of time, Arvind Kejriwal and Ms. Mamata Banerjee can contest with each other as the runner-up candidate who can be at number 2 position, trying to displace Rahul Gandhi from that position. But more the merrier for the BJP. The more prime ministerial candidates are there, the more fragmented is going to be the opposition, and it is going to be easier for the BJP.
Ouch.
So it's not just the positive mandate for Mr. Modi. That is one thing that he is going to enjoy, but it is also the fragmented opposition that is going to make his task really easy if the situations continue like this.
Well, Hindol Sen Gupta, add 8 to 10%, which means 41% in Uttar Pradesh for the BJP. Overall, maybe 51% in the Lok Sabha elections. And a very unkind cut by Yashwant Deshmukh, who says second place the fight is on for between Kejriwal and Mamta Banerjee to replace Rahul Gandhi. How do you see the road to 2024?
No, I think the road to 2024, and I would really like to confine my comments to the developmental agenda in India. Look, Navika, there is a fundamental transformation that's happening to the Indian economy. That transformation is led through the process of digitization. For the first time, a certain kind of democracy is going to the very grassroots. You mentioned Rajiv Gandhi, or somebody else mentioned Rajiv Gandhi. It is Rajiv Gandhi who famously said that, you know, when a rupee travels out of Delhi, by the time it reaches its beneficiaries, you know, it's only 15%, right? Because, you know, Delhi is very far away from everywhere, and that was obviously ironical. So wo paisa ghis jata hai, it gets corroded or eroded, right? Now that, of course, in economic parlance is basically leakage. Now what is happening? What is happening is historic, Navika. For the first time, India's goods of governance are reaching many, many people. I would not argue nothing is 100% successful, but many, many people are actually getting goods of governance without any leakage. This is unprecedented. This is why how India staved off the worst crisis from the COVID crisis, because people received actual money on the ground.
And the direct
people
benefit transfer will give the dividend that is at least targeted for. So 2024, time for everybody to turn their attention to that, even as Yogi Adityanath and his cabinet sit firmly for a second term for the next 5 years to deliver Uttar Pradesh 2.0 under brand Yogi. Thank you very much to my panelists for joining me on this very engaging